Up on Talking Points, the Senate rolls out an historic compromise on immigration. But is it dead on arrival?
And the FEC has received year-end finance reports from the 2024 presidential candidates. Who raised the most money and what that means for this year's election?
Guys, there's about a week left until we see who will replace ousted Congressman George Santos. We're taking a look at this hotly contested race as early voting continues. That and more now on Talking Points.
The details of a border compromise are coming into focus. Welcome into Talking Points. I'm Olivia Maniscalco.
And I'm Chilekasi, Adele. We now have details on the legislation brokered by the Senate and the White House.
Take a look at some of the spending priorities included in the $118 billion legislation. Roughly $20 billion goes to border security.
Meanwhile, $60 billion will go to Ukraine's war efforts, and another $14 billion goes to Israel. The legislation is being led by a trio of senators from across the political spectrum. Senators James Lankford of Oklahoma, Chris Murphy of Connecticut, and Kyrsten Sinema of Arizona.
But that hasn't stopped Congressman Williams. In a statement on X, Williams says in part that the compromise is DOA, which stands for Dead on Arrival. He also claims the bill was crafted to give Biden a get-out-of-jail-free card on the border. Joining us now is Talking Points analyst Luke Radel, who follows Syracuse politics closely for us. Luke, what was your reaction to the congressman's statement today?
Olivia and Chile, the statement from Congressman Brandon Williams on the border bill is not at all surprising, coming from someone who ran for office saying that he doesn't like bipartisanship because it represents, quote, politics as usual. In reality, what's politics as usual are statements like this from the congressman. Let's pull up more of what he had to say. If you take a look, he rolls out a series of, yes, talking points, many of which have been thoroughly debunked, and some are just a little strange. He calls the bill hashtag Biden re-election bill and claims its goal is to give Biden a, quote, get-out-of-jail-free card, even though, as you guys mentioned, the bill was drafted in part by conservative Senator James Lankford of Oklahoma, who isn't exactly a Biden campaign surrogate. Williams also says that the bill would allow for, quote, 5,000 illegal entries per day, which sounds really scary, but just because you write something in all caps doesn't make it true. NBC News fact-checked that claim last week when it was initially spread by, guess who, former President Donald Trump. And that brings us to a broader point about this border back and forth. Donald Trump and his allies in the House of Representatives have been explicit. They do not want to see a deal on border security before the election because they believe it could help President Biden in the 2024 campaign. When folks like Congressman Williams and Speaker Mike Johnson get fundamental facts about the legislation wrong, even though they have the text of the bill right here, you'd wonder why they are saying things that aren't true. And when Williams calls the deal the hashtag Biden re-election bill, you have your answer. He's decided not to actually solve the border security problem because it's much easier for him to just sit on the sidelines and blame everything on the current president.
Now, one of the Democrats here locally today is Governor Kathy Hochul. She came to Syracuse and challenged congressional Republicans to support the border compromise. What else did she have to say?
Yeah, guys, I was there and actually got the chance to talk to the governor about it. Here's what she had as a challenge for the New York Republicans. Governor, back to the border. You mentioned those 10 Republican members of the House. They have invited you to sit down with them for a meeting about these issues. Will you be meeting with them in the coming days?
When they vote for this, I'll meet with them. That vote should be imminent. I will be very happy to meet with them, but first they have to put their vote where their district is, where their state is. Their residents, the people of this state and their governor, expect them to do the right thing. Stop grandstanding, stop complaining about what everybody else can do. You have the power in your hands. Go to the speaker today. You've talked about SALT and other challenges where you can band together and be forceful. This is the issue of our time. Go forth and solve it, and I'll sit down and talk with you after you cast your votes in favor of the Biden-Schumer plan.
Thanks, everybody. Now, it's really interesting to see how the politics is played out on an issue like this in the state of New York, which is several thousand miles away from the U.S.-Mexico border. But because Texas Governor Greg Abbott has been sending migrants up to New York City, Governor Kathy Hochul has taken a more proactive approach on dealing with the migrant crisis. So her challenge to New York Republicans might serve her in her upcoming elections. Guys, that's all I have for you right now. Reporting in studio, Luke Radel.
Luke, thank you. Interesting, again, how New York has got caught up in this. Well, voters are showing up to the polls already in the special election to replace ousted Congressman George Santos. Now, New York's 3rd District is primarily in Long Island's Nassau County, but also covers parts of Queens.
The main challengers in this special election are Republican Mazi Philippe and Democrat Tom Suozzi. Talking Points analyst Peter Barry joins us now. Peter, this is such a fascinating race and a significant one, too.
Olivia, Chile, it's great to be talking about my home district here, but before we get to the special election on February 13th, we have to turn the page back and talk about former Congressman George Santos. So let's take a look at the timeline here. Santos became the 6th member of Congress to be expelled back on December 1st from a vote of 311 to 114. But most of the GOP leadership, such as Elise Stefanik and Speaker Mike Johnson, wanted to keep him around because the Republicans hold such a narrow majority in the House. Most of the allegations regarding Santos are charges of fraud, as he has 23 of them as of now, and he may go to jail September 9th of 2024, but he's starting to slowly become yesterday's news as he does more cameos for $400 a pop. The candidates for the special election consist of Republican Mazi Philippe, as she is a current Nassau County legislator from Great Neck. On the Democratic side is former Congressman Tom Suozzi of Glen Cove. He held the seat for 6 years before running unsuccessfully for governor of New York in 2022. But millions of dollars are being raised and spent by the two candidates for advertisements. Philippe is portraying Suozzi as someone who aligned himself with the Squad, the most liberal members of the House, and someone who is weak on border security. Suozzi is arguing Philippe is a hand-picked MAGA extremist who will vote with the most conservative House members if she's elected. He's also pointing out that Philippe has little interaction with the local media here.
Now, Peter, can you tell us what this race is looking like in terms of polling?
So I want to take a look at an Emerson College poll. They have Suozzi at 45 points and Philippe at 42 here. But the margin of error is 3.1%. So it's not the biggest margin. It's still a big toss-up here. New York 3rd seat has been blue for nearly 40 years until Santos came on the scene and took a 7-point lead. Long Island has been significantly more red. We've seen a Republican resurgence within the past years, such in my hometown.
And Peter, obviously this is not the first election we're going to be seeing, obviously with the general election, but is it possible we could see a rematch of this specific race in November?
See, I put a rematch in the very likely category. Tom Suozzi even went out and said even if he loses, he will run again. There's going to be another election for this in November of 2024, but if Suozzi could ride in with the Biden ballot and take the seat back here.
Peter Barry, thank you. Now let's head to Capitol Hill, where the future of a $78 billion tax package is not clear tonight. The House voted overwhelmingly to send the deal up to the Senate, but it's facing some opposition there. Now, Chilekasi, we're seeing the votes 357 to 70 in the House. It seems like a pretty bipartisan effort. What are these yays voting for?
Yeah, let's talk about first the idea that it was so bipartisan, right? We're talking about 357 yays, the 70 nays, 169 Republicans, 188 Democrats joining together on this package. Here are some of the main points, as you're about to see on your screen. Some beef ups to the child tax credit, increasing the max refundable credit for households who owe little to no income tax. The credit would be tied to inflation starting this year if the Senate passes it. The Center on Budget and Policy Priority says that the max credit would be up to $2,100 per child next year. It's currently at $2,000 per child. Now, some Republicans have complained about work ethic, about undocumented immigrants. Some Democrats say it doesn't do enough for low-income families, so it's, again, those fringes, but there's also those moderates coming together. Also on this, tax relief for businesses I'm looking at this. There's going to be some potential tax breaks for U.S.-based research and experimentation investments, also some for disaster relief, and also some enhancements to the low-income housing tax credit.
Now, Chile, let's talk about New York. What is the role that New York's congressmen and congresswomen played when it comes to the tax bill? How did they vote?
Let's talk about the yays, right? Let's bring those up on the screen. Some notables for you there. Brandon Williams, the congressman representing the district that Syracuse falls in, New York 22. Claudia Tenney, also supporting as well. Elise Stefanik, the fourth-ranking House Republican, also in support. Democrats, 13 yays, most notably including Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, but also you take a look at some of the nays. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Jamal Bowman, saying no to this. Now, 4 moderate House Republicans nearly sank a procedural vote unrelated to this bill. Anthony D'Esposito, Andrew Garbarino, Nick LaLota, and Mike Lawler, they wanted to show their displeasure, and the reason is this. They didn't raise the $10,000 cap on the federal deduction for state and local taxes, but they went back on that.
Now, you just talked about some of the issues. What are some of the challenges the bill could face in Senate? Do you think it will make it to the president's desk?
Yeah, listen, 51-49 in the Senate right now. I think there's a possibility. There doesn't really seem to be that much breakup in the rank and file among Democrats, but Republicans are iffy, right? Marco Rubio, he wants the child tax credit to be tied to work requirements. You also see somebody like Mitt Romney who comes from the fiscal responsibility type of argument, and that's his main complaint for this. People like John Cornyn, Lisa Murkowski, they want this bill to go to committee first and kind of see the financial assessment before they make a final decision. I mean, but you also have people like Chuck Grassley who flat out said, listen, there's a potential that this bill would make President Biden look good. So I'm a little bit iffy on supporting that.
Chilekasi, thank you. We will continue to update on our social medias as this bill, as it unwraps in the Senate. After the break, though, we will unpack the numbers in the 2024 candidates' year-end fundraising reports. Stay tuned.
Here you go.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome back to Talking Points. As we push through the primary campaign trail, candidates seem to be giving it their all to fight for each and every state. But how much are they spending, and what are they spending it on? Talking Points analyst Luke Welch joins us now to shed some light and provide us with some answers. Luke, follow the money.
Chile, good evening. Before we take a look at what they're actually spending, let's take a look on how they're getting the money. Let's take a look at the campaign funding numbers for the year of 2023 before we see Biden sitting roughly around $90 million, Trump just a little bit under that, sitting around 80, and of course, Nikki Haley, Trump's main opponent, is sitting roughly at a third of that. Other candidates like RFK Jr. and Biden's contenders like Phillips and Marianne Williamson are sitting well below that. But let's take a look into the flip side now on how they're spending it. Trump actually surpasses Biden, sitting around a little under $50 million, but Biden's not too far behind in the spending. And again, Haley, between a third and a half of what Trump is spending, and of course, the other candidates below that. But let's take a look at this Republican Party and see. The end of last year, we see Trump was gaining almost $80 million. DeSantis, Ramaswamy, and Haley all at almost half of that. But something interesting to note here is that Ron DeSantis and Vivek Ramaswamy, they called it quits after not getting the votes, not getting the donations that they received. But Haley, she's still playing strong, even though she was the bottom of these major 4 candidates that we've been talking about throughout the primary campaign trail. Now, something that Nikki Haley might have been keeping her going through this race, though, is this chart right here. We see Trump has been dropping steadily since the second quarter of 2023, but that could be the $50 million that he's had to spend on legal fees in the year 2023, and the upcoming $83.3 million he have to pay that he just lost to author E. Jean Carroll. Now we see Haley just a steady decline. It's been back and forth. She spent around $6 million in a deficit of advertising and merchandise, but we see she's actually just gained a recent donation of over $15 million in the past month, so which has raised her up. But let's take a look at these numbers, Biden versus Trump. We see Biden is beating him in funding, spending, cash on hand, and even these disbursements. Biden. So the Biden campaign, the team there will be celebrating. And let's take a look at where exactly these donations coming from. Expectedly, Biden's getting them from California, New York. Trump is getting them from Texas and Florida. But Haley's, she's getting them from states like South Carolina, Florida, New York, Texas, California. So let's take a look at who these donations are coming from. We see PAC, Trump is leading, but let's take a look at individuals. We see Biden and Haley are gaining most of their donations from individuals, which seems like they are the American players. And then, of course, transfers like other ended campaigns, like Vivek Ramaswamy and Ron DeSantis have been going to him. That's all I have. Chile and Olivia.
Thank you, Luke. The Senate held a hearing this past week on the role social media companies play in keeping children safe online. During the questioning, things got heated between lawmakers and the tech CEOs. Listen to this.
Mr. Zuckerberg, you and the companies before us, I know you don't mean it to be so, but you have blood on your hands. You have a product. You have a product that's killing people.
Wow. The hearing marks the latest effort by lawmakers to address the concerns of parents nationwide. Throughout the questioning, senators pressed tech leaders on whether they support legislation meant to address online safety. Zuckerberg expressed regret for his company's actions and pledged to prevent it from happening to others in the future.
And coming up on Talking Points, President Biden has sanctioned the Israeli government over increased violence from settlers in the West Bank. How this impacts the current conflict, coming up.
Yo, camping buddy. Okay, you guys ready?
Dude, I thought you were driving.
I thought you were driving.
Oh, I never said I was driving.
I definitely can't drive.
Okay.
If you're high, just don't drive. It's illegal everywhere. If you feel different, you drive different.
Welcome to my house. Lately, not my happy place. Everybody's pretty tired of each other. The parents were not themselves. My little brothers were morphing into small creatures. The walls were closing in. Clearly, a case of too much family, too close, 24/7. And there's a lot of that going around right now. If this sounds like your house, try going someplace new. YourLifeYourVoice.org. You'll find lots of ideas to help you handle the family stresses of being confined to close quarters. YourLifeYourVoice.org. It might not get you out of the house, but it could help you find a little more breathing room.
Welcome back to Talking Points. President Biden is at a crossroad after releasing an executive order against violent settlers in the West Bank. This is as the Palestinian death toll stands at over 27,000, according to Gaza's health officials. Talking Points analyst Ericka Love is here to tell us the next steps the U.S. government might be taking. Good evening, Ericka.
That's really sick. Iraq and Syria. These strikes are reportedly connected to the attacks launched by the U.S. against Iran-backed groups the U.S. is accusing of attacking and killing 3 Americans in Jordan last week. This comes after President Biden attempted to make strides towards accountability last week with an executive order putting sanctions on 4 Israeli settlers in the West Bank. The executive order put bans on travel visas and financial restrictions on these individuals for what the State Department says included aiding or inciting violence against Palestinians in Gaza. U.S. lawmakers like Senator Ben Cardin also have zeroed in on the role of Americans or dual citizens in settler violence and intimidation. In a letter last month, Cardin, who is also the chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, asked the White House to take action against any U.S. citizens involved in attacks against Palestinians. He said that should include criminal charges and financial sanctions. According to a new poll from the Associated Press, 50% of U.S. adults believe the 15-week military campaign from Israel has gone too far. President Biden's foreign decisions put him in an even more crucial place as he decides what to do after the next drone attacks in Jordan. Biden has called for an independent Palestinian state that would exist alongside Israel in the past, a decision that has floated throughout various American presidencies, but Biden argues that finding a way to achieve Palestinian sovereignty once the Israel-Hamas war ends is essential to building a durable peace. Over in Israel, protests will continue, many demanding the resignation of the current government as thousands continue to take to the streets in Tel Aviv.
Now, Ericka, interesting enough, President Biden's cabinet especially has been getting the heat in the past couple of weeks for decisions regarding Gaza. Why are protesters holding the entire administration accountable, not just Biden?
Well, that's the thing. There's been protesters outside of the Secretary of State's house, this Defense Secretary's house, and the Minister of Security for the country, mostly because they're holding the whole administration accountable for all of the actions. It's not just President Biden. The protesters' attitude is that everybody has a part in this larger issue. They feel like the Biden administration hasn't helped at all in Gaza.
Ericka, of course, this is a topic ramping up, especially in a big election year. What other consequences may the president be facing as election season ramps up?
Well, the difficult decision around putting out the executive order right before he went to Michigan was that some people feel like it was a political move used towards the Arab American community, which has a high percentage in Michigan, which they think was very strategic on his part. But the other part about it is he may be handing Trump a political weapon in this entire issue, because many people feel like Trump will use this to advantage and use this to his advantage and take advantage of the fact that President Biden hasn't had a clear plan on what he's planning to do in the region.
We'll watch it. Thank you so much. Well, the European Union has agreed to a funding deal worth more than $50 billion for Ukraine. This happened in the summit last week, and it comes at a pivotal moment in Russia's war against Ukraine. Funds have been blocked since last December after Hungary's prime minister vetoed the same deal at a previous summit.
Simultaneously, President Volodymyr Zelensky of Ukraine fired Army Chief Valery Zaluzhny after speculating tensions. Here to tell us more about what this all means is Talking Points analyst Andrea Rose Oates.
Actually, I believe we're going to get Andi right now. Actually, take a little bit till we get there. Again, this is a very pivotal moment for Russia's war against Ukraine, and you see a lot of debates over the funding, right? You see Americans who are kind of split, they're kind of torn on this one. They're more in support of Israeli funding towards that war, but you take a look at the stark contrast between this one and that one.
Yeah, no, it's definitely interesting how, because of the war going on in Israel, a lot of the focus has been taken off of the war in Ukraine in terms of how Americans are looking at the way that the U.S. is funding it. So, you know, there really has been a lot of the attention taken off, but now, as you're seeing, as the conflict in Israel continues, you know, people are taking a second look and really looking at what President Volodymyr Zelensky is doing over in Ukraine.
And you kind of wonder, again, relating it back to the States, you know, this is a war that I think was top of people's minds, then it wasn't, and then you have the war between Israel and Hamas come up, and this one kind of falls by the wayside, but you kind of wonder if it's going to be an issue for people going into this election as well.
You're right. You know, looking into the 2024 election, these issues are going to be at the forefront. We've talked about it a lot on this show. We've talked about how not only are the domestic issues, you know, with taxes and abortion, but there also are a lot of people looking at the foreign issues, like in Ukraine and in Israel.
Apologies, some difficulties there. We're going to move next to our other segment, and coming up next, the U.S. jobs report released last Friday, a sign that the labor market is booming. We'll unpack these numbers and what they mean for the future of the U.S. economy when we come back.
It's a beautiful day out here. Sunny today with light breezes, giving way to clouds in the afternoon. We could see some light precipitation to moderate precipitation later on, followed by powerful storm-like conditions. 90 miles per hour winds are expected. Authorities are asking everyone, stay indoors. Come on, that's it. Let's go.
Women are bad with money.
That's what the world's been saying for centuries.
But now, we've got something to say. Save it. Save the old-fashioned advice, the empty excuses. It's all worthless, unlike us.
To our fellow females, it is time to save ourselves by saving our money.
Contributing to our futures, investing in our independence. Until we're no longer
80% more likely than men to live in poverty in retirement.
So again, we say to that, save it.
The falsehoods, the feelings of fault, then the funds.
Learn how to save for your retirement at wesaysaveit.org.
Hey, welcome back to Talking Points. January proved to be a great month for the U.S. economy as the country added over 350,000 jobs. Talking Points analyst Ben Bascuk joins us now with this surprisingly strong report and what it means for the U.S. So, Ben, should we expect this growth to continue going forward?
Yeah, so we will see. Right now, Democrats and the Biden administration are not afraid to tout those economic accomplishments coming off of that January jobs report published by the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics. They estimated 185,000 jobs to be added, but we actually saw 353,000 jobs added. Now, a lot of those from healthcare, a lot of them retail, some sales, but a big chunk being government jobs. A lot of government hiring in the month of January. Now, moving forward, looking at the unemployment rate, we are sitting at a healthy 3.7%, right wedged between that 3 to 5% range, which is great for economic growth, according to economists. And we've stayed below 4% for 2 consecutive years now, coming off of that pandemic high unemployment rate of 15%. And Biden wants that sentiment to resonate with voters. He came out and released a statement by the White House saying it's great news for working families that wages, wealth, and jobs are higher now than before the pandemic. And I won't stop fighting to lower cost and build an economy from the middle out and the bottom up. Now, that sentiment has not resonated from voters. CNN just had a recent poll that said just 26% felt the economy was starting to recover. Why do they say that? Well, maybe it's because 845,000 people dropped out of the labor force in the month of December. The unemployment rate, taking a deeper dive there, we look at the labor force participation rate of prime age individuals, that is 25 to 54-year-olds. That has fallen in the past few months, so we're seeing those prime age workers dropping out of the labor force. With that, we would expect to see real wages increase because there's less people in the force, and hours increase. We've seen the opposite. Complementing that fall in labor force participation rate, we've seen real wages decline and hours worked decline. Now, what is that saying? With unemployment claims skyrocketing, we're seeing people falling out of labor force unable to find work. It means that companies are losing revenue, and to make up for it, they're turning to cutoffs in their labor force and layoffs. Those layoffs are taking place in private companies. PayPal, Google, UPS, Sports Illustrated, and Microsoft all having massive layoffs this past month. 81,000 layoffs by over 100 plus companies. This is the second highest level of job cuts since January 2009 when we were leaving a recession. So look, the economy's not doing bad and the job market's going to be okay. But we have to look past those headline economic spikes, right? There are some cracks starting to form, and it's something that Biden's going to have to keep an eye on, especially going into an election year.
Thanks, Ben. Yeah, let's talk about this as we close out the show. And I think it's interesting to kind of take a look at some of the data, right? There are some conflicting reports as to how Americans are feeling. I mean, there's a Michigan study I saw talking about sentiment jumping on the economy, 13% to reach its highest level since 2021.
Yeah, and really the most important thing is how Americans feel about the economy. Only 26%, as we just saw, only 26% of Americans feel as though the economy is starting to recover from pandemic levels. And those numbers don't look great for President Biden. I mean, if people aren't confident in the economy with him as president, then it's not very likely they're going to be confident to vote for him again.
And one of the things, right, you could talk about the job numbers, you could talk about the numbers, but I think the most tangible numbers for people, what they see when they go to the gas pump, when they go to the grocery store. And while things are starting to come down a little bit, I mean, you're taking a lift compared to 4 years ago, 3 years ago. I mean, you're seeing gas at like still over $3 a gallon in a lot of places, including this state. Well, that's our show for this evening. Be sure to follow us on X and Instagram at CitrusTV News. I'm Chilekasi, Adele.
And I'm Olivia Maniscalco. Have a great night, Syracuse.